All right, let's dive into what is, without a doubt, the most sacred and, honestly, the most theatrically complex period in the entire Christian year, the Easter Triduum. We're talking about a 3-day journey that moves through service, sacrifice, and finally, resurrection. But right out of the gate, we hit this really interesting paradox. How can 3 completely distinct days, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, be treated as one single, unbroken celebration? That's the core mystery we're going to unravel today. So the name itself, Triduum, that's just Latin for 3 days. Easy enough. But here's the key. Theologically, this isn't seen as a series of separate events. It's one single, unified act. Think of it less like 3 different episodes of a TV show and more like one epic movie with 3 acts, where the camera never, ever cuts away. Okay, so Act 1 begins on Holy Thursday evening. The liturgy itself is all about commemorating the Last Supper, but it really zooms in with this laser-like focus on 2 huge themes: humble service and the gut-wrenching betrayal that's about to happen. This service unfolds through 3 incredibly powerful rituals. You've got the institution of the Eucharist, which is the absolute center of Catholicism. Then you have this really shocking act of humility, and it all wraps up with a stark, kind of unsettling conclusion.
Let's just pause on that second ritual, the washing of the feet. I mean, in the ancient world, this was a job for the lowest of the low, for a slave. So when you see the priests get down and reenact Jesus washing the feet of his disciples, it's not just a nice gesture. It becomes this living picture, a visual argument, saying that in this new kingdom, authority comes from serving others, not from having power over them. And then the mood just completely shifts. The priest literally strips the altar of everything: the cloths, the candles, all the ornaments. The tabernacle where the consecrated Eucharist is normally kept is left empty, its door wide open. This whole ritual is designed to make the church suddenly feel cold and hollowed out. It's a symbol of Jesus being stripped of his clothes and abandoned by his closest friends.
So what's left of the Eucharist is carried in this really solemn procession over to a side chapel, which we call an altar of repose. And the people, the faithful, they're invited to stay, to just keep watch, echoing that lonely, heartbreaking plea from Jesus to his disciples in the Garden of Gethsemane right before he was arrested.
And here it is. This is the first big clue to our whole mystery. The service just stops. There's no, "the Mass is ended, go in peace," no final blessing. The story is just left hanging. It creates this tension that's meant to carry us right into the next day.
So that tension brings us to Act 2, Good Friday. Now this is wild. It's the only day of the entire year when a Catholic Mass is not celebrated anywhere in the world. Instead, it's a day of just profound silence and a somber focus on the crucifixion. And the service begins in the most dramatic way you can imagine, with absolutely nothing. No music, no words. The priest and the other ministers just walk to the altar in total silence and lie face down on the floor. This act of prostration, it's the ultimate sign of grief and humility in the face of the mystery of death. You see, the whole liturgy today is just stark, totally stripped back. After that powerful silence, we hear the Passion story read aloud. Then we move to the central ritual of the day, which is the adoration of the cross. And finally, a series of universal prayers for the entire world.
The absolute heart of this service is the adoration of the cross. A large, plain wooden cross is brought out and presented to everyone, and the people are invited to come forward, to kneel, to touch it, even to kiss the wood. It's this deeply physical, tactile ritual that's designed to make a 2,000-year-old event feel intensely personal, right here and right now.
But here we go again. The liturgy ends without an ending. Just like on Thursday, it all concludes in silence. No dismissal. No blessing. The divine drama is still paused. The tomb is sealed, and the whole world just kind of holds its breath, waiting.
And that waiting brings us to the climax of the entire Triduum, the Easter Vigil on Saturday night. It's often called the mother of all vigils, and by church law, it absolutely cannot begin until after nightfall. Why? Because its entire symbolic power depends on one thing: real, authentic darkness.
You know, it wasn't always this way. For centuries back in the Middle Ages, the vigil was bizarrely celebrated on Saturday morning. You had people singing "This is the Night" in broad daylight. It wasn't until 1951 that Pope Pius XII restored it to its proper time, insisting that, look, the symbolism only works if there's real darkness to push back against. So, the service begins outside in total darkness with the blessing of a new fire. From this fire, this huge Paschal candle is lit and carried into the pitch-black church. Then, that one flame is passed from person to person, from their little candles to the next, until the entire building is just glowing. And then, as the Gloria hymn starts, wham! Every single light in the church is switched on. It's a sensory shock, a kind of theological jump scare meant to represent the world being changed in an instant.
And then this ancient hymn, the Exsultet, is sung, and it contains this incredible mind-bending line. It basically reframes the original sin of Adam and Eve, not just as a tragedy, but as a happy fault. Why? Because it's the very thing that ultimately led to the glory of Christ's redemption. It's a wild idea.
This powerful connection between death and new life gets symbolized in this incredible way when the priest takes that lit Paschal candle and plunges it into the baptismal water. In that single moment, the tomb of Christ becomes the womb of the church, the place where new Christians are born through baptism.
So now we can finally step back and see how these three seemingly separate services are actually woven together to tell one single continuous story.
Let's just trace the progression here. On Thursday, our main symbol is the basin and towel. It's all about service. Friday, it's the stark, bare cross of sacrifice. And then at the vigil, it's the fire and water of brand new life. The music moves from solemn melodies to total silence and then just explodes into joyful hallelujahs. And the endings, they go from a procession to the tomb, to a silent departure, and then finally to a real conclusion.
You see, there are these key symbols that weave through the entire narrative. You've got blood, representing the sacrifice given in the Eucharist and then on the cross. You have water, first used for humble service and later transformed to bring about new birth. And light, which is snuffed out in the darkness of death, comes roaring back as an explosion of new life.
And this, right here, is the core theological truth of the Triduum. The liturgy is structured this way for a very specific reason, because you can't have the resurrection without the cross. You can't fully understand the sacrifice of the cross without the self-giving love of the Last Supper. They are absolutely inseparable parts of one single act of redemption. Which brings us to the final amazing payoff. At the very end of the Easter Vigil, for the first time since Thursday morning, the priest finally says the words of dismissal. And this isn't just the end of the vigil. It's the grand conclusion of the entire three-day liturgy. The story that began in service, that passed through the silence of death, is now at last complete. The Triduum is over. So really, the question isn't how 3 days can be one celebration. It's how could they possibly be anything else?